Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. When I think about people who've had the most influence on me, like many or maybe all of you, I can go all the way back to my parents, to a handful of teachers, a bartender or two, my friends too, of course. It's a long list, and I always find myself adding to it, especially as the years go by. But professionally, the handful of colleagues and mentors and bosses, and I suppose a few writers and speakers that I know, it's a much smaller list. Then, looking at where I am now, somewhat of an authority on communications, I guess, a few awards on the shelf and on the wall, a reputation as a leader in the communications technology, aka CommsTech world, a level of confidence in my own views and perspectives that I've never had before, all of which led to the Trending Communicator, which you're listening to now. I owe all of this, or the vast bulk of it, to 3 or maybe 4 people. One of whom, arguably the top of the list, is with me today. A trending communicator by any definition, he's a leading voice in the communications profession. You'll find him on all kinds of boards and committees, from Page Society to the Institute of Public Relations, where he's a trustee. He's speaking about and writing about communications, comms tech, employee experience. He's a winner of multiple awards. He's had a career that saw him rise to leadership roles at IBM and Bloomberg, and then 6 years ago, started his own employee experience agency. A Forbes contributor, educator, a member of the University of Florida's Thought Leadership Circle, he does more for our profession than just about anyone. Many of you already know who I'm talking about. The CEO of Integral, my friend and confidant, the only one and only, Ethan McCarty. And I'm verklempt just saying that, my friend. So good to have you back on the, reimagined pod. How are you?
I don't know. I'm like a little verklempt myself. That is a really lovely introduction. I appreciate that, Dan. And gosh, like the thing that I most want at this stage of my career is to be helpful to other folks. And the way you just put that means a lot to me. So I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm stoked to be here talking with you. Every time I do, I feel like we discover something together and learn something. And so when you asked if I'd be willing, I didn't just say willing and able, but like eager to have another conversation with you. So, let's see. And I just, I think, I mentioned this to you. I shot you a text. I just really loved the conversation that you had with Lisa Kaplan, and the intro you wrote was wonderful. And she's so smart. And anyway, so I love what you're doing here. And so thank you for inviting me to be a part of it.
I should mention, of course, that you introduced me to Lisa,
it's my pleasure
to many of my podcast guests in the past and probably in the future as well.
I certainly
and
hope so.
You're saying that you can come back anytime. Be careful what you wish for. I think it's clear that we have a rapport. We go back now 5 or 6 years back to whatever 2017 or 2018 when we started talking about CommTech, that nascent committee back in Page Society.
Yeah.
Friends of the pod will know that I talk about you sometimes and that you've been on before. When it was the Dan Nestle show, this is your first appearance as a trending communicator, but clearly you've been a trending communicator before this. This is not your entry into trendingness or whatever it is.
I'm so trendy.
Look, you're trendy.
It's the fact that I wear the same thing every day.
Yeah, normally it's he's the man in black. Normally, in the intros and things, I start to touch on what we're going to talk about in the show, and I didn't really do that in this one because I just wanted to, first of all, pay homage to my good friend, but also, it's an anything goes kind of conversation with you every time, but always looking at the future and always looking at what is important to communications, what's going on with, especially like employee experience, because that's clearly your area, your chosen area these days, although you can speak to pretty much anything. But I do want to hear a lot about that. And, as you said, like with Lisa, we spoke about misinformation and disinformation. There's a direct connection to that conversation with the way that you deal with employees, the way that companies should be speaking with their employees. And I know that you've written about that and discussed that with other, within our profession. So I mean, it's all connected, I think is what I'm trying to say. And I do want to get into Comtech and AI as we can. I mean, AI is a common topic on the show because, let's face it, it's everywhere, and it's, it's still and will continue to be foremost and like a primary mover in content creation and in workflows and in much, much more as we go forward. But let me just give you the floor, man, because I want to know what's up in your world and what is it that, that we as communicators and marketers even should be like kind of looking at right now. And what are you looking at that's of concern, that's bubbling up to you? And, we can start anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you what's on my mind right now. And that is, as a small business owner in the communications space, I run an agency, and I can tell you what the market is telling me. And because of what my clients are telling me, and what are the needs that I see across my clients. And
hey, wait a second, Ethan. Could you just remind our listeners, because some people are new to the pod.
Yeah.
Tell them a little bit about Integral.
Sure.
And your specialty and what you do, and then we can continue on with it.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. So I started in Integral about 6.5 years ago with the intention to really put a focus on employees as a public. And that's kind of the core belief, is that employees are public. This idea of internality and externality is a useful construct for some things, like figuring out how to allocate budget or configuring a content management system or something like that. But it's not of great strategic value. Thinking of employees as a public is. And so if you consider it that way, then you would think of managing a relationship with that public with great intention. And some organizations do that well and others don't. I believe that communications professionals can have a really, really strong hand in helping organizations manage the relationship with employees in really productive ways. And I think there's, a real opportunity to do good with a capital G, given that so many humans spend, upwards of 80% of their lives at work. So if you can optimize that set of relations at work for, strategic value and for positive experiences for the humans involved, that feels like a lot of good outcomes, right? And so that's what Integral does. We look at employee communications, from the top to the bottom of every organization. I mean, like literally what's coming out of the sort of mouths and the memos of the C-suite, all the way into metadata on an intranet and everything in between. We think about that like sort of ecosystem of communications. We also have a very strong focus in the technologies that support work. So we, digital workplace as a much broader concept than, just like which mobile app or intranet are you using, but all of those digital experiences and the data that sort of all the artifacts that back up the data artifacts that back up your relationship at work and with colleagues and collaboration and all those things, and social media and so on. And then culture and change in organizations. So every organization is in a state of change. Sometimes it's very accelerated. Sometimes it's very acute. Sometimes it's just, the change that is happening in society or in that, industrial sector or, what have you, that market sector. And we think that there's a particularly important salience of culture to how organizations accommodate change, whether you are going to be able to sort of greet change with, sort of the resilience and open-mindedness does not come down just to like one individual's will, like whether the CEO is good or not, but rather the agency of many, hundreds or even hundreds of thousands of people who are implicated in that change. And that's you can actually inspect and design and enhance and improve cultures to, to be beneficial, for the people who are involved and, to drive those business outcomes. So that's what
Wow.
Integral has done. And we've had the
Hmm.
privilege to work with, many brands across, number of sectors. I mean, very, large pharmaceutical companies, fashion, retail, technology, finance. We don't really niche down by industry, but rather work with organizations that are, encountering, they're sort of encountering this, I think, this moment where it's very clear that employees have much more agency and voice and ability to affect reputation and the ability to affect customer outcomes. It's like that's, I think, more deeply understood now than it maybe ever has been. And so, I started this business. I started this business, coming from two organizations that took employee communications very seriously, Bloomberg and IBM, and and even created space for me to do work that was experiential, not just messaging and delivering of content and so on. And I think that's when we go back to like what I think is on the minds of many leaders in business, not just marketing and communications. It's this understanding that, oh, wow, we have maybe over rotated on our investment in, chasing headlines with public, sort of traditional public relations, or chasing clicks with traditional advertising. And yet we're sitting in relationship with many thousands of people whose connections probably dwarf the reach of any one article or advertising, or by orders of magnitude. And so that's the thing that's happening. I think like I'm happy that this is my chosen line of work, because there's a lot of sort of renewed interest and energy around it right now.
So, okay, I kept writing different things down, and we'll get back to that. We'll get back to some of them, probably not all of them. Before we do that, though, you're about to tell us about what's on your mind, about what the market is telling you through your clients. And we're going to start there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a meta thing. I actually just wrote a piece. I think it's going to come out, and it'll be out on Forbes, I think, by the time this pod goes live. And it's I think the title is something like "When Communications is the Organization." And
Ooh.
yeah, and it's this, I think many organizations are coming around a little bit more sincerely to this idea of, the way they configure communicating, across an organization, not just with its own people, but like with vendors, with partners, with customers, with the public, who might be, legislators or what have you. That like actually is the company more so than the buildings or the product. It's like the way we are in relationship through how we communicate, and that it's not a mechanical feature. It's, of like, like we don't have enough volume, or we don't have the right channels or whatever, but it's like, it's something much more, it's something much more meta. It's like the way we're doing it, the voices that we use, the authenticity and the integrity of the voices in play, the diversity of the voices in play, and then like all those downstream things, like are we using video versus written word or what have you. And so there's this thing called Conway's law, which is it's worth a Google, but it's basically this guy Melvin Conway in 1968 wrote an article called "How Committees Invent," and he was writing about software development. And in that article, he advances this idea that the way communications is configured is reified in the product that organizations make. And then there's there's like shorthand for that. The Silicon Valley shorthand for that is companies ship their org chart, and there's, like the way you're set up is the way, you make stuff, and the way, and then there's this other theory, and I forget the guy who, it's in the article, the actual guy who came up with it, but it's called the constitutive theory of communications, which basically says, the way you communicate constitutes the entity. And there's a really great, we should put this in the show notes. I'll send you the link, but there's a really great, one of those RSA animates of a talk by a professor named Matthew Kochman, who sort of unpacks it. It's really clever. And I think when you take those two things together and you say, like, okay, well, there's this idea of constitutive theory of communications, like the way we're communicating, that is the organization. And then this Conway's law thing where, the way we communicate shows up in our products and what we actually make, and maybe not even literally the product, like a product could be like the reputation of the company. The most reasonable conclusion is to inspect how you are configured, how your communications apparatus is configured in order to optimize these outcomes, like who you are as a company and what you make. And so I think, I look across our clients and more of them are engaging me and my team to help them design not just campaigns, not just content, not just, like facilitating a session or something like that. Like, we're doing, I think, very sophisticated experience and content design, but now we're doing more work, as I would suspect many other, consulting agencies in the space are doing, on the design of the organization itself. And that is, and that's just, that sort of like that fundamental work is worth revisiting, even if you have a working model, to check it against, sort of strategic intentions.
It certainly, it sounds like it goes far beyond the scope of a comms team. I mean, this is an organization wide initiative, right? But do you see the comms team as the center of this? Is that how it's working for you? Or
yeah. I mean, I'm kind of selling my book to say that, but I mean, I think that there's a very, very strong proximity bias here for me, because my clients tend to be the heads of marketing, communications, and HR, and that's where we often will start. And then what keeps happening, which I love, is it's it starts off with let's reorganize our internal comms team around some like a new principle for let's remission that group of people to be whatever the end goal is, to be more driven by experience, or to be more digital, or to be more this, that, or the other thing, or less expensive, or more productive, or use more AI, or whatever the initial sort of driver is. And then you start to inspect how that team is operating, and it has implications that are much broader. And that's why those theories come into play, because it's like, oh, well, we've designed this internal communications function in a way that is really like about sort of it's almost like a value added postal service, like at the end of something, we make all the decisions and we give it to these people who know how to press the buttons on the intranet, or make the distribution list. And then the entire organization feels that every day. They feel the sort of like low stage of recognition, empowerment, creativity, latitude for decision making that's been invested in that old model of internal communications. Like that, like you literally encounter that every day as an employee. And so that has that effect that I was talking about, of being like both, it constitutes the experience that people have of the organization, and also indicates how they should behave. Like, oh, you're communicating to me in this way that is very sort of transactional and down level. That signals to me that that's how I should comport myself with my colleagues and customers. By comparison to redesigning an internal communications team to be an employee experience team, or to be an employee engagement team, or just to be an employee team, or whatever, people experience. I mean, there's a lot of different things, and not just renaming it, but like fundamentally looking at the remit, decision-making rights, the funding, the skill level, all those things, and saying, all right, well, let's up-level that. Let's make that investment, for example, in a more senior leader to drive that function, a deeper hook into our innovation capability, deeper hooks into our product or whatever,
Yeah.
to make those investments of political capital and money and time. And then that will be felt in the rest of the organization. And so when you start doing that, it sends such a powerful signal that other parts of the company take notice very quickly, because literally the things they touch every day, intranets and newsletters and town halls and stand-up meetings with the manager and the up skip level thing with the boss, and all those things start to feel very different because they're designed differently. And it's a kind of really positive snowball effect that can happen. Now, we've been at this for not a very long time, just, like 6 short years. So, and the first few years we were in such startup mode that we weren't operating at this sort of altitude. And now that we are, we're starting to see that, the sort of like positive momentum build within the organizations that we're working, that we work.
The metaphors keep rising unbidden into my head as you keep talking. And it's just, there's so many, because, okay, conceptually speaking, right, when we talk about internal comms versus external comms, and the transactional nature of that versus employee experience, and that kind of, it seems to me there's a path between the two, or an evolution that has to happen between the two, or just a reimagining in many ways, which is super exciting and also daunting, I think, for a lot of companies. But what keeps coming to my mind is 2 things. First of all, it sounds a lot like the approach or the kind of definition of brand in general. The way that kind of what a company is not its product. It's not its staff. It's not its CEO. The brand is, a promise. The brand is a reputation. There's 1,000 different ways people have defined it. I always like brand as a promise. But it's a meta discussion. And the way that you've sort of started to describe the employee experience, or the employees as a public, the combination of Conway's law and constitutive theory, which of course,
it's kind of a mouthful.
I will absolutely be Googling after this discussion. It sounds like we're taking almost that kind of same, I don't want to call it academic, but much higher level approach to what communications is, so that the company is the brand. The company is that amorphous, whatever the result is of the communication within it.
Yeah.
And I totally get what you're saying. Resonates so much.
It is a bit academic. And I'm literally like pointing to academics, because, I was looking as a practitioner, as somebody who spent 20 years in-house, with somebody screaming at me, why isn't the thing up yet? Like, hit refresh, whatever, like, get the memo out, like at the end of the day, like that's your life when you're, when you're running any facet of communications, is, like that's your life. And
get the message out.
Yeah,
that's the life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily have the language or like the models in my mind to like cope with this thing that I was seeing. And so, I've spent some time looking at it. And, I teach a course on the topic at Columbia, and that is, that gave me sort of a space and a reason to go do a little bit more exploration and kind of find these things. And yet, for me, it is not academic in the pejorative sense. It isn't like a worthless pursuit that doesn't have, like a tangible outcome. Because I like, for me as a strategic communicator, I always think, method and the way you work should be part of your strategy. And so, you start off with something very highfalutin, like, Conway's law or the constitutive theory of communications. And you say like, okay, well, if that's true, then how do I operationalize this?
Yeah.
And so basically what I'm saying is like, one of the ways that I'm seeing it operationalized is a, re-examination of like the roles, the skills, the decision-making rights, the funding and stuff, all those things that relate to building a contemporary and fit for purpose communications capability for any enterprise. And then there are other, downstream things like, okay, if you think that that's true, you might there are sort of tactics that you might deselect entirely because they're not, or you might, change. Here's an example. If that's true, this idea that the communications is the organization, that's what comprises the identity of the organization, you might take a look at how much of your comms money you're spending on getting the message out versus listening and sensing and perceiving and synthesizing and analyzing the world of data and opinions and all that. And what I find is that almost every communications team that I encounter is massively underinvested in their ability to even know what employees think. I mean, and other audiences as well, but employees in particular. And I'm seeing a real appetite right now for organizations to do a lot more robust sensing, beyond, click-through rates on the intranet. I mean, those are important too, but the sensing behavior is getting up-leveled, so it's beyond justifying the ROI of my investment in a newsletter and going into something more like, oh, well, if we really understand how people have experienced the company over the last 3 economic cycles, we might be able to predict what's happening in the next economic cycle and prepare ourselves and prepare them for whatever it is we think is happening. And, so not like some predictive analytics, roll out a software and press a button, it's going to tell you the future, but rather like, oh, we see these patterns and we're able to improve our understanding of the patterns by, listening frequency, a lot of conversations, a lot of digesting commentary, a lot of real, looking at for employee voices on Reddit and not just on, Glassdoor, or looking on, like all these places where there's all this abundant information. Most organizations, if it's called internal comms, they're probably not even fish in there, but that's where the fish are.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it amazes me that, that especially, companies that are dealing with the volatility of markets and certainly, the ups and downs that we've seen across many industries these days. And, I've certainly been involved with that, that they wouldn't want to grasp this a little bit more tightly. So, I was saying about how metaphors keep popping up unbidden into my head. And one thing keeps coming back is this idea that, okay, like, we're of an age, go to the doctor, right? And every couple of months, whatever it is, 90 days, or it depends on you, but maybe it's twice a year. Doc says, hey, let's run a panel, right? Let's get your blood work. Mm-hmm. Let's get your blood work. You look like you're functioning perfectly fine, but you know what? There's a little number in there somewhere that's not quite right, or hopefully not. But there's they can see things in the results and in the data, in the intelligence that they gather from that very from the basis of your life system, that with a few little tweaks here and there, or some elimination of some activities, addition of some others, right, makes a better holistic, final kind of health grade to your system, right? So it sounds like, I've always said that comms is like the nerve center of a company, and I think it is. But now it sounds, from what you're saying, is more like the circulatory system, and the health of that bloodstream, right, is coming out of the way that the organization communicates with one another. And like I said, if it goes beyond the comms team, that's fine. It's just more like, what is a blood cell other than a communicator? It picks up a message, it goes out somewhere, it transfers that message, oxygen or whatever it is, to another place, picks something back up and brings it back, right? It's this whole messenger service.
Yeah.
So, the health of each of those, kind of where it's all going, and the way that that exchange takes place at all the different exit points and entry points of that system, have a direct effect on the health of the corp, right? Of the whole.
Yeah. Well, it's literally the corp is like the body. Corpus.
Yeah, the body, right? Well, and
I like the analogy, and I think it's a strong one. And I mean, to extend it a little bit, you think about what was available in terms of listening to your body 20 years ago versus listening to your body now. And I mean, you're talking about the panel of blood work that you might get at an annual frequency. That was available 20 years ago, right? Maybe not with as much precision and sophistication, but that was available. And now, like I wear an Apple Watch, and it's telling me like the quality of my sleep, how many steps I've taken, my blood oxygen level. I mean, like I can basically do this kind of continuous listening to optimize my health. And the same can be said for, at the enterprise level, the sophistication of what's available at not like the bleeding edge of technology, but the sophistication of what is available is light years ahead of where we were, 5 years ago, even, particularly since all of what happened during the pandemic. And then also the flip side is, not the flip side, but to sort of, double down on your analogy here, you said we're at a certain age, and so your listeners know, Dan is older than I am.
Barely, but
by some months. Old fart.
We're Gen X. We're Gen X. Let's put it that way.
Gen X was on the vote. No, he's an old man, and I am a youthful chicken. No, but yeah, we've gotten to the point where actually the expectations of your body have changed. Like it wants that more, care and feeding and tending and whatever, because it's not capable of doing that. There's a similar reality in that the expectations of the workforce, not because of old age, but because of the expectations in our lives as consumers, have changed in a way that we demand more input into the experiences that we encounter every day. We are accustomed to a very high degree of, sensitivity to our preferences. I mean, everywhere you go, you walk into an experience that's been customized for you in one way or another, particularly if you're at the upper end of the, of the sort of income spectrum. You live in a highly personalized world. I mean, from frequent flyer programs to showing up on Amazon to the health and life insurance options that are offered to you, to all kinds of things are super, super hyper personalized to you. And so when you go into a place where you don't have that, you actually, it's remarkable. And very often the workplace, it's like, you've got, an old colleague of mine at IBM used to say, you've got, Jetsons in your consumer life, and you've got the Flintstones at work.
Right.
And so, and so you walk in there and you're like, why is it like you guys, like my boss knows everything about me, and the HRIS system, it knows everything about me. It knows where I live. It knows my age. It knows, everything I clicked on, at work and everything. Why am I still having to search for things in the workplace? It's like complete possibility for hyper personalization. And, you obviously there's a lot of good reasons why that hasn't been like blown out entirely. Sense of privacy and, and wanting to be able to have some control over those things. But what is to me staggering is how little of that has been operationalized.
Yeah.
Because, it's like there's a lot of things that would not feel like creepy and not feel like, you're excluding me in the workplace, that basic data things like, all right, well, we know you walk in through this door every day because we see your badge swipe. Maybe the enterprise could be like, I don't know, we'll get you a reserved parking spot a little closer to that door. I mean, like stupid
Something
things like
that
would make, but you can imagine like, if a hotel chain can do that for you and they barely know who you are because you stay with them 3 times a year, why can't your employer, where you walk in through that door, 300 times a year?
Why indeed, Ethan? Why indeed? I think I think that we all have had experiences where every workplace is different. They're better and worse than one another in different ways, and you have these complexities of structure that I think are off-putting to the decision makers. Like it's just. It requires, in other words, it requires a degree of curiosity, experimental, a corporate value of experimentation, and sheer bravery on the part of leaders in especially larger organizations to shift their minds in some way, but also shift their budgets to invest in the kinds of activities you're talking about, but also to think of the employees in a different way, to think of the employees as a public, as you said. One thing that was occurring to me as you're speaking is this whole, is just that what is the comms team? What is the internal, what's often seen as just the internal comms team? There's a cognitive dissonance, I think, between how these professionals are viewed outside of the team and what they actually do and what they actually can do. Mm-hmm. And one of the many things that I've been trying to put forward in the various roles I've been in has been that one of the roles of the comms team and the marketing team also is intelligence, right? A source of intelligence. When larger companies especially think about business intelligence, and they think about turning data into action, or they think about all of those things that you just mentioned. Oh, this person's key card is at this door. Let's move them up to this. Let's move their parking space. That's a function of intelligence. Yeah. Meaning, data. Yeah. But when you're internally and when you're in the company and you say, I'm going to transform my team, or I'm going to expand the remit of my team and start to look a lot more like a business intelligence unit, for example. Boy, does that fall on deaf ears.
It can.
Like it can. So what should teams be doing? How should leaders be looking at this? Because it's I think it's an astoundingly large opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. And it requires different kinds of communicators. It requires upskilling, as you said. It requires a whole technology kind of apparatus, but not necessarily technologists.
Yep.
Right.
Well, there's two ways that it happens, Dan. There's two ways. I mean, there's basically there's two ways that happen. It's not when an organization is in steady state or in free fall. It's not going to happen.
It can't happen.
No, yeah. What's going to happen is either a company is in investment mode. It has, free cash flow. It's looking to take share. It's like we've gained the advantage. How do we solidify that? We're on offense. So it has to be that mode, or it has to be at the bottom of free fall. Like, oh man, like we've just gone through, we've gotten through bankruptcy and now we're rebuilding. I mean, that's a kind of hyperbolic example, but or there's been a massive exodus of our most talented people, and now we're like, oh crap. And so how do we remedy? And so, I think it will be hard to make the case unless you're on sort of either end of the spectrum there. And if you happen to be in the middle, I don't think you're without, any options, but it's probably going to be more of a skunk works. Like, how do we peel off part of our resources? And one of the things, and we actually did a little bit of work like this together a while ago, is to look at take like a sort of portfolio view of what your team is doing and segment it into, this is like the horizon model, where like first horizon is like, okay, here's all the stuff that we have to do and the company knows we do, and we're going to just do. and like it's known. The Horizon 2 is the stuff that like maybe we can do. We probably need some additional funding or partner with a different group. And then there's Horizon 3 stuff, which is like we have no idea. It's moonshot. Like the best KPI for this is we might learn. Or maybe it's a lottery win, but probably not. And, if you can peel off, somewhere between, 3 and 6, 7% of your total resources for that third horizon and make sure that, people across your team who are actually excited about the work are participating in that. You make that a special sort of dimension of their work and you give them the remit to move into those spaces, but you also have, they have some protection because they're also involved in some of those, materially involved in some of those Horizon 1 and 2 sort of endeavors. It gives them some protection so they're not like over their skis, like, holy crap, I'm on the innovation team. And if, we miss our quarterly numbers, I'm toast. You don't want to put them at risk, but you might be able to get like some part of their time allocated to sort of inventing the future. And in comms teams, it's almost always achievable. I mean, comms teams are always under the gun and underwater and, they're all that stuff. And also because of the difficulty that we have measuring communications, there's often a lot of latitude to do experimentation. I mean, you can't be off there, taking the brand for, for what do you call it? For a joyride. You don't want to do donuts in the parking lot with the brand, but you gotta, but you can peel off some effort of some high performing people and say, all right, well, we need to go like ensure that the company is out there, reinventing itself in some very, very significant ways, but we don't have the either burning platform or pile of cash to do it right now. So what small measure of innovation can we dedicate ourselves to? I mean, that's what we're really talking about is innovation here, right?
Right. And look, you're so right when you said that it only happens when the company is, in that we're taking share mode or like we're in a growth mode or, hey, this is the best times we've ever had. Let's give some people some runway and let them play. But if things turn and when things turn, the first, I guess the first area of concern for some companies is where are we spending money that's not yielding any direct results to the bottom line? So, so those areas tend to go quickly.
And no one's beholden to writers.
I can attest to
that. One of my friend Jeremy Altoff, he actually runs digital at Hawaiian Air, which is like the coolest job ever, and he's the coolest guy.
Man.
Totally cool. This is like a million years ago when we were both getting our degrees in creative writing because we're lunatics, and I just remember him saying, no one's beholden to writers, And that has just stuck with me forever. And then I just remember like how many things he and I have cycled through, or maybe it was after we got degrees in creative writing, and we were both like pup writers at these like little startups in New York, in the 90s. And it's like I think he was working for Urban. That's what it is. He was working for Urban Fetch, which was like an early like on-demand delivery of like snacks and stuff in New York. And he was writing about video games. He was like their video game writer. And when they started to lose money, they canned him. And he was like, no one's beholden to writers. That was it. And we both had creative writing degrees. And anyway, I think he's right. And so I think, for comms people to say, oh, we're the master storytellers, we're the writers and whatever, like, I think that's true. And that's really important. And storytelling is another area of great interest amongst our, my clients is, how do we improve? How do we evolve? Storytelling is so like, it's like infinite, the different permutations and the power of it. And also it's not enough. It's not enough to be like, I'm the corporate storyteller, because companies will ultimately in a pinch decide I'd rather have my story either not told or told poorly, than pay your salary. And so if I'm scared, if they're in that defensive crouch mode. So if your value can extend, particularly again, into being able to listen and analyze, and to your point earlier, be the thinker, the strategy,
Intelligence,
to have the intelligence, to have this, the strategic intelligence, if that's where a lot of your value comes from, that's a different proposition. And you look at the best communications leaders, they're always more, they're not like, just like this, the best speech writer. They might actually be the best speech writer, but they're not. They're the consigliere. They're the person who sees, through the fog of war. And that is, you don't do that without, relationships and understanding and, direct
that is so
access
right.
and exposure to the data.
That's so right. I think of the great comms leaders I've worked with, and that's exactly what they are. They're consigliaries, consigliaries.
Yeah.
That's and look, I mean, I've been accused of being that on occasion as well, and I love it when people say that I'm a trusted advisor. When it lasts,
Yeah. That's it. That feels, and it feels good too, to be of service to. I mean, like some of my the best moments in my career were when, like even if I was like, getting coffee for the boss, like when I walked up, I was like, okay, so with your coffee, here's an insight, and you know what I mean, or whatever. So it's like I don't think it's solely the province of the most senior people,
right?
Like I've had in my career as a manager, I've had people who supported me, who were like at the very beginning of their careers, who came in and they were like, hey, like you are stepping in a big pile of it right now, buddy, who called me in on things. And that is powerful. I've had, and I've been in a position to be able to go to, my boss or whoever, even when I was very early in my career, to say, I don't think this is right. Like, would we ever try it this way? And, being that advisor for them, on either communications tactic or how they're showing up as a leader or whatever. That was, even with my degree in creative writing as a writer, that advice was probably much more valued than, my ability to spin up a yarn.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, becoming an advisor or like that trusted partner, the consigliere of anyone really requires a trust building process. And if you're in a company or if you're in a role on a comms team or a marketing team, and you need to build those relationships, you need that. Oftentimes you have to start from a position of knowledge and intelligence, or you have to have that in your pocket. Like you start from a position of friendship and empathy, probably more often than not, or I would hope.
Yeah.
But recognizing what is happening and having the data and intelligence to back you up takes that conversation from, hey, like I like talking to this person, to, wait a second, I might need to make business decisions based on what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And that person is more valuable to the organization. So I guess my next kind of question to you, and where I wanted to find your thinking on this, is the whole question of like, how do comms people get there? Like, what's the enablement side of this? So you have people struggling to get that message out, push the button, spread the word, whatever it is. You have, companies in various stages of their growth or decline. But our comms people are from one place to another, are, beating the grass to get the pheasants out, hey, let's get this message out today and let's put this out tomorrow. And it's really just a mad rush in a lot of ways. Where's the enablement happen? Like when you have, if you know that you need to be, you need to get a handle on intelligence. You know that, boy, if I could understand what is happening with this particular audience, or what's happening in this particular, when this event happens, what is the result, or what has been the result historically? The economy is hitting a downturn. We don't see rates rising for another 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 18, 27 months, whatever it is. What does that mean? And how does somebody who's so focused on pushing the button every day become enabled?
Yeah.
Like,
that's a good question.
I've been working a lot with AI enablement, of course, just you need to say, it's always a product of time. You have to have the time to first educate and kind of allow people to experiment and develop use cases. But that's with AI. But that time is a luxury, and you need buy-in from from your leadership. So that whole piece of it is a struggle, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. I mean, like that's hard. That's like being in relationship with, with people and, being able to be valuable to them and be in service of them. And,
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard. And I think you're right. There is some of it is a function of time. I mean, um, before spending several years working on IBM's annual report, I was not qualified to read an SEC filing or, proof it.
Yeah.
Then after doing that, I was, you know what I mean? And so like, there was no, like, I don't think there's any AI in the world that would like make me learn that faster.
No.
There are certainly AI agents that you could use that would help me in that task now that didn't exist then. But I think part of it is, as a professional, is like just you got to grind. You have to cut your teeth. Like you have to do the work.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, it doesn't take 30 years. Like we're at Integral, we're gearing up to do this offsite in a few weeks, and there's a woman on our team, Haley Self, who was an intern like a minute ago, it seems. And, she's been full-time at the company for a couple of years now. And, but she's very much in the early stage of her career, but she put together a video in advance of our offsite about, account management. And, it is brilliant. I mean, like I learned so much from it, and it's like a 10-minute video, and just like how she talked about her own practice of, like the world of information that she sets up for herself when she's on a client account, the alerts, the reading, the finding out about people's personal preferences and, what they like, what they don't like, and the way she sort of her mental model for, for building trust and relationships was so authentic to who she is. And it was so like smart. It was very technology enabled without being overly mechanistic, and so I just think like anyone at any stage in their career can take the kind of human sensibilities of wanting to be in relationship and apply them in their work world and sort of dial them up with technologies that, fast track a lot of stuff. Now, what you can't really fast track is your experience acquisition, but you can definitely, as Haley has been doing, totally turn up the volume on the quality of those experiences. So, she might be whatever it is, 3 years into her career, but because of the way she's comporting herself, she's packed in more in terms of like understanding how to be a strategist and support senior executives and do the job, of listening and analyzing and synthesizing. She's done more in the 3 years than I think I did in the first 10 years of my career because of the way she's done it with an openness to new methods and technologies and, just candor. And I mean, so I think it's like, you can get there very fast. And if you're a 50-year-old and you're wanting to go from one kind of work to another kind of work, there's almost, I mean, never been a better time. I mean, not least of which, historically low unemployment, that's a good thing. That's wind in the sails. So that there's more openness in the market. When there's lower unemployment, there's greater openness in the marketplace for people who are going to switch sectors or roles. I mean, that's just a fact. You see that more because people are like, oh, well, there aren't a glut of, this kind of, skill. So we'll take somebody with like adjacent skills and we'll train them. And so in this moment, I think, you have probably more, openness than ever in the last, during our, for the duration of our careers. Like there's been a longer stretch of low unemployment and a higher degree of, sort of self-paced training and tools that would allow you to do that than has ever been available during our working lives.
Yeah, I mean, well, and now being on the cusp of that sort of a life myself right now, I'm finding that to be the case. There's a lot of receptivity to certain ideas and certain ways of working that wasn't the case in the past. And I just want to say one thing is that I had a conversation just yesterday, actually, with a CEO of one of the big PR firms. I don't want to name him because I don't want to scare his staff. But we were just talking about like, will we need junior staff? Like, will we need junior staff in the future? What can we do? And from an agency standpoint, it's a critical question. And what you've just talked, when you're talking about Haley, I think that's the answer. I think the kind of person that Haley's the answer. I think the kind of person, the kind of people that agencies and that actually any employer should be looking at now is the self-enabled person, the person who is just like, okay, digital native is the wrong word, but someone who's experimental, open-minded, and will be entrepreneurial enough within themselves to build their own ecosystem of intelligence gathering, research, knowledge. Hey, it's a high bar. You have to have the intelligence and you have to have the understanding to be able to get there. So you have to have some core, talents and skills. But to be able to do that, I think it's clearer and clearer to me that is the quote unquote junior employee of the near and midterm future. On that note, Ethan, I know that we're running up against it. I just wanted to ask you one last thing, which is, what is coming down the pike and what should people be on the lookout for and take us home, buddy?
Yeah. Well, let me give that a little bit of consideration. So first, just before I answer that question, I want to just say, there have been a number of times in my career that people have said, oh no, but what for the junior staff? We won't need clipped reports anymore. So what are they going to do? How will they ever learn how to tell a good story if they haven't showed up at the office at 5 a.m. with a stack of Wall Street journals?
Exactly.
And the internet is going to replace all of the 20 something. Okay. So let me just say that's a cycle that is observable. And I'm just calling shenanigans because what happens is, of course, the complexity is, there's it's like the Overton window of complexity just keeps moving out. And so the quote unquote junior person shows up able to not just do the clipping and word processing, but able to use these systems of analysis and, sentiment analysis or, share a voice or what, and that becomes the entry level skill. And so the thing that I'd be more worried about if I was, your pal, who runs the agency is what do you do with the senior people, who are, running around with bloated salaries and are relying on gut instinct to advise their clients? I'm more worried about those folks. And I'm not actively worried about, I don't lose sleep over it, but those folks, had better continue to go up that value window or that value, I said window, that value pyramid. And be able to say okay, well, I'm going to make even more and better use of, all the amazing insights and, digital capabilities of these quote unquote junior people and only do the things that I can, uniquely do. And I think that's a lot harder than finding interesting and valuable work for recent grads. I think there's a ton of work for, recent grads. And I think the harder thing to do is when you're in the middle or senior management to be able to, continuously break new ground.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And so, but let me, so I'll answer your question. What do I think is coming up? I mean, I think everybody knows what's coming up. I mean, there's 75 elections taking place this year, about half of them already have. I think, you look at what's happening across Europe with so many of these falling towards more sort of conservative, restrictive governments that have, less place in their heart for a free press and so on. And so I think folks in the communications industry are going to be much more directly affected
Yeah.
by, sort of the rightward nationalistic trend in politics. In the U.S., obviously, we have a highly, highly polarized political environment, and that is not going to get better anytime soon, I don't think. And so every employer right now is rightfully wringing their hands around what to do about the dialogue about politics in the workplace. Do we set up a Slack channel that's like politics here, and everybody else should go look somewhere else if you don't want to talk politics at work? Do we ban politic conversations? Do we blah, blah, blah? Meanwhile, at Integral, under Charles Chestnut's leadership, we've been doing research with both ResearchScape and the Harris Poll, and we just find again and again that the majority of people who are fully employed believe that they not only can have the right to work to talk about social issues at work, but feel comfortable doing so. It's a slim majority, it's like 51-52% who agree with those statements. But then when you go into the earlier stages of the workforce, the millennials and Gen Zs, that goes through the roof. And so the inbound workforce feels comfortable, feels they have the right to talk about these issues at work. They want their employers to create spaces for that and to take political action. And the only thing that I've really found that keeps up, they're like to try to find your way to please everyone on every issue is not going to happen. And so the thing that I found, that we find in our research is there are a few issues that have relatively universal support. Things like, decreasing hunger. Actually, 78% of American workers believe that their employer should enable them and even create paid time off for them to participate in voting or working at the polls or supporting democracy in those dimensions. Unfortunately, even that's like highly polarized. But that is what's going to play out over the next 6 months in the U.S. and elsewhere and beyond. And so, make your friends before you need your friends, my friends. And that is like, if you can do the listening and understand, the needs of your workforce when it comes to, engaging with societal issues, if you can at least indicate that you're listening, that you care, that you have some principles that are going to guide your actions, like that's the play. There is no like, oh, and here's a decision tree about like, does this affect our business or not? Your employees are not, they don't care. They're like, if I care about this issue outside of work, I care about this issue inside of work. I don't drop my identity at the door, like no one does.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, whether or not the company or the brand, whether or not it's appropriate for a brand to communicate about particular issues to the public, to the external public, to their customers or clients, that there are a lot of, I guess, there are a lot of mines in that minefield, and you can, companies pulling back now, it comes and goes in waves, and that's always going to be the case. But with your employees, with that public, as I'm going to start calling them now, the employee public, I guess, I don't know. There's no such, there are many fewer obstacles or reasons to not communicate what the company is doing or thinking about issue X, issue Y, issue Z, unless it's completely irrelevant and not part of the business. But even in that case, you have to be very clear about why it is and why you're not saying something about it, but allow employees to talk about it themselves. Like there's degrees of this, but I think the very worst thing, it sounds to me, is to just put the boot down and just shut it down. That's not going to create an environment of trust and openness. Not only that, but that you need.
I won't go into the case studies, but there are a number of them where leaders have taken that approach, and what they basically did was an unintentional reduction in force of their highest performing employees. Because people just walk. It's like if If you do not respect my rights and I'm a high performing employee in an environment where there is 4% unemployment, what do you think I'm going to do? I'll probably get a raise, So it's just, like that's not a good strategy. It's not real. It's kind of magical thinking. And so you have to say like, okay, well, here's the rules of the road for how we're going to be talking about politics or whatever issues. And like, if you want to engage, like, here's the rules of the road. And that is very well respected. I mean, like generally, what I've seen across our clients is like when, like if there's an internal, chat program like a Yammer or Viva Engage or Slack or whatever, if you are very clear about the guidelines, like, look, we're, in these channels, we do not talk about politics. This one you can. Here's our expectations about how we comport ourselves. And so no electioneering, but if you want to talk about your feelings or your experience, there's different cultures are just like different things. People are like, oh, okay, cool. Just like I wouldn't come into your house and like, I don't know, just go to sleep in your bed, like that's, or that would be very weird,
or just like with any other channel that you deal with social, like in just, if we keep it straight to social media, there's certain things you don't do on this channel. There's certain things you do on this one. You join a group that something's allowed, join another group it's not. You accept rules. Well, listen, Ethan and everybody out there, I could keep going on and on and on with Ethan.
We always have a nice time.
Well, we're gonna have another nice time at some point soon, and I know that for a fact. Keep an eye on this space, and Ethan and I have some other ideas that we may bring to the public sooner rather than later. But for now, I'm just going to leave you all with a first of all. My gratitude to Ethan.
Thank you.
You can find him, of course, at teamintegral.com, which I do suggest everybody go take a look at. Not only for employee experience and the work that Ethan does, but also the tremendous amount of research, the great blog posts, the insights that you'll find there that are, I think, applicable across so many of our roles and our professions. So look at teamintegral.com. Find Ethan on LinkedIn and look for him on Twitter, X Twitter, Twixter at Ethan MCCC.
You
don't post anymore?
Nah, I put stuff on LinkedIn now.
Yeah.
I just can't.
You can take a look.
Yeah. You could see what I used to post.
Yeah. Take get a glimpse of Ethan's past. But LinkedIn, teamintegral.com. That's where to go.
Dan, thank you.
Thanks, my friend. And I'll catch up with you again very soon. Thanks. Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to the Trending Communicator.